Dee Brooks refers to herself as the chief hugger of the Yedda Institute. She's already transformed my morning by giving me a hug. Through her down-to-earth style, Dee builds on what's strong, not what's wrong, by bringing people together in dynamic ways to realise and engage the full potential of their networks and communities. Over 20 years, her community engagement and development work has inspired thousands of people worldwide in community, organisational and governmental settings. Dee's background is in youth work and community university outreach and research, and is a passionate grassroots practitioner, facilitator and trainer who believes in tapping into the collective wisdom of communities to strengthen what's already there. Dee was an intentional nomad for 5 years who travelled and worked in over 20 countries until COVID had other ideas. She is the ABC and Art of Hosting Community Builder and Chief Hugger of the Yedda Institute of Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, will you please welcome to the stage Dee Brooks.
So thank you. It's so good to be here. I was talking with Kate this morning and I figured that I've been working on and off with CDAT since, I think, 2010. Yeah. So, and David, you might have been at the forum at the Curry TAFE. Yeah? That would have been about then, about 2010? Yeah. So, look, it's really good to be here. When Gail contacted me, and I haven't seen Gail for 10 years either, I was like, of course I will. And I will put my apologies in early for tomorrow because I'm starting work with the LDATs in Queensland online. So I'm going to be with them tomorrow afternoon. So my work has been very varied. I never know almost day to day where I'm going to end up. Depends what comes in my emails into my inbox on where I might be. So as Nick was saying, I have travelled and worked through a whole lot of countries and a whole lot of experiences to share with you around that. Before I start, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're on and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. During the pandemic, I ended up on the lands of the Dja Dja Wurrung people. So I've flown up from Naarm just last week. But when I got back from work in the UK in 2020, on the 1st of March, and I flew into Melbourne, and my eldest daughter lives in Bendigo, and I thought, I'll go up there for a couple of weeks till this thing blows over. And I lived in Bendigo for 2 years. It was a bit crazy. So I've just recently moved, and I'm now on Boon Wurrung country, so also known as St Kilda in Melbourne. So I've gone from regional to very, very city. One of the things that thinking of, it takes all types. And I want to talk about that from the perspective of community development, but it will also be quite personal. And I think we're a little bit ahead of time, Nick, so I can play with people, can't I? Awesome. So I'll actually make this a bit interactive as well, and we'll have a bit of a practice of, what it looks like when it takes all types. So the model that I love, I teach, I live, it's in my blood, is asset-based community development, which I'll tell you about very shortly. But basically it's looking at it from this point of view. So we can look at communities through these two different lenses. When we look at the glass half empty, we're looking at communities with problems, what needs fixing, what's broken, that kind of really glass half empty. And we're looking at communities as having deficits and needs. When we come from that glass half full, so from the bottom up, when we look at communities through that lens, we're looking at communities that have resources, they have networks, they have people with passion, skills, abilities, talents. It's all there, and we can build on it from there. And the interesting thing that has happened quite often over the years, people will say to me, that ABCD thing, you're just looking through rose-coloured glasses, like communities have real issues. And this addresses those people who say that. Because what we find when the starting point is from that glass half full, we discover what we have already there to address the glass half empty. So by starting there, it's more energizing, it's more life-giving to discover what is there and what we already have. So we'll talk about that as well. So ABCD as an approach, it came from the States originally. Just last year, I became the very first non-American on the board of the Institute, which was after poking and prodding them for years, going, it's not all about America. And so finally, we're kind of starting to build the board out a bit more. And they've stopped calling people faculty members. We're stewards. Everyone's a steward of the practice, of that bottom-up approach. So Jodie and John, who are in the photos there, they're the co-founders. And they are still active in the community. John McKnight's now 93, and he still turns up to every board meeting and every subgroup meeting, and he's just always there. We have an online ABCD unconference every year, and he's there. So ABCD is really underpinned by these few points, but by social justice particularly, and also self-determination, which is our alternative, as in the Eder Institute, to empowerment, because we don't believe that no one has power. So when we think of it from the view of self-determination, then it's about how we can, move forward with those basic underpinning principles. So what is ABCD? So really, in a nutshell, as I said, we're coming from the bottom up. We're looking at what people already do have. So it's building on what's strong, not what's wrong. So yeah, we're placing community at the centre of decision making. And that's really important for when there is something that has come up that people are working on, they're talking about with each other, thinking about what might be next, who can be involved, who's not at the table, what are the resources and networks we have. We need community to be at the decision of that, at the centre of that decision making, to really be part of that instead of being told. So the next one there was the activating individual and community participation. So we'll talk about that, and that's a bit of an activity that I'm actually going to get you guys to all do. Building on community leadership. So when we talk about community leadership in ABCD, it is not the usual suspects. So it's not just the people who say, I'm a leader in community, or the head of the social services club, or someone who kind of self-nominates, or might have even, got accolades or very deserved awards for being a community leader. ABCD also talks about those non-usual suspects. So this could be like a lady who is down the end of a street, where all the school kids go after school before the parents come home. She's taking a leadership role. She might not identify as a community leader, people might not call her that, but that's the role that she's taking. So it's those unusual suspects as well that we're looking for. And then strengthening local connection and relationships. So ABCD is built on relationships. It is about nurturing, strengthening, maintaining those relationships to get good stuff done. So there's 6 assets of ABCD. And this is just in a nutshell. I'm not going to stop on these for too long. The circle, the diagram, is more the American words, the American literature, and the words on the left are what we kind of translated them to for the Aussies, or Aussies and Kiwis. So we've got those individual talents, skills and passions of people, like I said, community groups and networks, and they can be formal and informal. So it could be those community groups who meet the soccer club or any sports clubs. That might be the more formal community groups, but then the informal ones, like mums and bubs who meet at the park on a Saturday morning. But we've got those 2 groups that we can kind of look at to tap into. The next one is the government and non-government, and I think we all know them. So churches and schools and multicultural or community centres, all of those ones who I'm sure we all know. The physical assets is also in two different ways, and that's the natural and the built environment. So we've got in the physical, in the natural, bushwalking, mountains, beaches, parks, cycleways, all those kind of things that are in the natural environment. And then the built environment might be schools that have sporting fields, commercial kitchens, things that might be often underutilised in community that we can tap into. Could be community centres and their rooms, could be infrastructure, photocopiers, phones, but it's kind of that natural and built environment is something that we do have there that we can tap into. So the economic assets, that's also thinking two different ways. With the economic assets, we can consider it like where do people spend the dollar in their pocket? Do they drive an hour up the road to Westfield to get their bread and milk? Or do they buy it at the local corner store? So that economic mapping of where the dollars go in community, how it circulates, how do we keep it within community for good? You know, as in for good work, not for good. And then the last one is stories. So stories is such an amazing asset. And I'm going to tell you a couple of stories because stories stick like glue. You will remember stories that you hear here over the next 2 days long after you've forgotten the theory. So stories are so important and powerful. So through stories, we hear people's values. We can talk about culture. There's just so much that comes from that. So it's a very, very important asset. So asset mapping is one tool of ABCD, and this is what I'm going to invite you into very soon. And so with asset mapping, the first thing we're doing is identifying those assets. So thinking of that list of 6 assets. And that is always done with others. This is not a desktop job. This is not about you getting some flip chart paper together with staff. This is about actively going out, discovering what those assets are. So really identifying them. Then it's connecting them together. So where can those assets connect together? Whether it be something really simple, like I find out Nick loves horse riding, and I'm like, Kate does too. I'm going to put them together to have a chat. What might that look like? But it's connecting those dots. And then it might be finding an equestrian centre for them. And then they go into the Olympics. So who knows? But, you know, it's about connecting those dots up. The third one is really powerful. And it's part of CDAT's real opportunity here, is creating opportunities and spaces for these assets to be productive and powerful together. So it's not just identifying them, it's not just connecting them up, but it's creating the opportunity for them to be together. And this is really important part of it. Because in ABCD, this is what we call mobilising the assets. But it's about action, basically, rather than mobilise, which is a bit of a jargony word. So here's the first story around ABCD and how it grows. So we called this the Asset Mapping Atlas because we didn't really know what else to call it. And so it came from some work I did in Indonesia in Jakarta with childcare services from across Jakarta. And they were thinking, how do we apply a model of foster care? And they were looking at taking this Western concept, applying it over here in Indonesia to look at foster care. So we started from outside on this atlas. So you'll see it's got the micro and the macro. So in that macro space, that ecological, we had discussions around, you know, it's more than people, basically. So there is the land, the sea, the sky, animals, plants, there's all of that. Then within those systems, in that next one, the systems mapping that we did that you'll see on a photo on the next slide, in the systems mapping, all we did was look at what are all the different elements within the childcare system. Put one thing per sticky note and put it up on the wall. Group them together if you've got one similar to your neighbour, to your friend, to your colleague. So they started mapping them all out. Oddly enough, as I'm sure a lot of you could guess, really top heavy with services on one side. And there was this little cluster down here called kinship care. And I was like, tell me more about that. And we ended up digging into that and finding a whole lot of other stuff that they were already doing, foster care. It was there. It was kinship care that needed to be strengthened. So we started working on that. So then the next one in from that is those organisational mapping. Each of these elements in the macro and the micro all have a bunch of tools to map those particular areas. I just don't have time to show them all to you, but I will show you some. So in that organisational space, we're really mapping what is it that your organisation has that can be offered to community to strengthen what they already want to do or what they're already doing. So rather than mapping the organisations as a kind of collective and going, well, here we all are, it's actually about, and what else? So within those organisations, who are your constituents? What are your networks? What are your materials you've got? Meeting rooms and spaces. Like I was saying before, photocopiers, telephones. Like what's the stuff that you have that if community had an idea, an initiative, and they came to you and said, we'd love to do this through CDAT, what do you have that you can offer? What do you have that you can offer back? So in the micro then, we're looking at the partner stakeholder. And partner stakeholder could look different. And thinking of partners, and I think it might have been David who was talking about partners before he left. And I wrote down a little note to myself, and it was a quote from one of my friends, Richard Holmes, in the UK. And he says, always build relationships before you need them. So then they're ready to go. They're good to go. You've got them. So then when there's an idea or there's a funding coming up or there's a pandemic or whatever it is, you've got those relationships ready to just activate. So build relationships before you need them. Then in that community space, in the community mapping, we use those 6 assets that I just showed you. So then we're out there, we're having conversations. My work before I ended up working at Newcastle University was in drop-in centres. And I remember I was working in a drop-in centre in the Hunter Valley, and there was a bunch of young guys who couldn't find work. And I said, well, let's go meet people. So there was about half a dozen young men aged between 13 and 16, and we went up and down the main road. For any of you who know Curry, it's not that big, but there's a lot of shops. We went up and down the road meeting people, introducing these boys, going, here's who they are. There was a guy with a paint shop on the corner, but I don't think is there anymore. And he said, where are you all from? And we said, the drop-in centre, the youth centre in Curry. And he goes, we've got one of them. And I said, do you have a back door? Do you park down behind your building? And he said, yep. And I said, come show me. And we walked out the door and opened it. And I went, see that building there? That's the youth centre. So he didn't have it in his peripheral either, or in his awareness. So once we had those, and one of the young guys got an apprenticeship with that painter. So once we'd kind of gone out and met people and we mapped, what is it that we actually have there in community to tap into? It built relationships and it created opportunities. And then the individual mapping. So the individual mapping is those talent, skills, passions of individuals. And that's the one we're going to do something on in a second. So this was the work in Indonesia. They are not scared at all to jump on the floor and get into it. We did have tables. This was their chosen way. And it was just a buzz of energy, and it was so exciting. So you can see that the mapping of the systems is the one that's the big long photo there. And it was just mapping it out. It wasn't saying, what are we going to do about this system? Let's arc up against the system. Well, kind of was as well of that. But it wasn't. It was really to provide a visual so people could just acknowledge and see the system. Because it's huge. It's huge. And no one person can change that alone. Probably not even if you were Prime Minister. Or maybe. But yeah, no one person can change that. So then we went through these mapping activities, through the whole atlas, and we got to that individual level in the centre. And when we mapped the individual talents and passions of everyone in the room, then I invited them to now look back out through that atlas. Where can you offer your talent, skills and passions back out through that system? And it just went off. It was incredible. There's orphanages in Bali now that have shifted from a service model to a learning centre because they shifted their focus. And I wish I had more time to go into that, but another time. So this is what we're going to have a look at now. So you're going to do a bit of individual guerrilla mapping on each table. So these gifts of individuals, we call it the 5 H's: head, hand, heart, heal and human, connection, humanity, whatever you want to call it. So with the gifts of the head, this is not saying share something you're an expert in. It's not what it's about. The gift of the head is share something with someone that you like to talk about with others. It's just something you know about and you like to talk about. So gifts of the hand, that's obviously something you like to do with your hands and share with others. I struggle with this one because I can't cook, I hate craft and I kill plants. So I always have to think, what is something that I do with my hands? I talk with my hands. I teach drumbeat, therapeutic program with my hands. So think about that. Heart, what is it that you're really, really passionate about? Like what wakes you up at night with an epiphany, or you think about in the morning when you get up? And it could be anything from the environment to child protection to turtles or lamingtons, whatever it is, but something you're really, really passionate about. Heal is that thing that you do, and sometimes it's a gift to yourself. You might do it on your own or you might share it with others, but something that grounds you when you're feeling really overwhelmed. So it could be walking, meditation, swimming, motorbike riding, whatever it is. But what is the thing that grounds you when you're feeling really overwhelmed? And then the human connection. How do you stay connected to your local community? And think of your neighbourhood where you live or your local community that you work within. How do you stay connected? Do you make sure that you see the guy every Friday putting his bins out and go, yep, he's good today? Do you share a cup of tea with someone in your neighbourhood or connect up with all the other young mums with children? Or what is it that you do to stay connected? I'm going to give you all 4 minutes. And on your table, you can choose one of those assets you'd like to share, if you want to. You can be nominated one, whichever you'd like. But the thing that I'd like you to do is with the people who are on your table, everyone offer an asset, something you've got, to the centre of the table and come up with a social enterprise or an innovation or a creative idea or something. And I've heard some really weird stuff. I've heard some really weird innovations come out of this. So it's okay if it's a bit far out there. So go for it. Have a few minutes and see what you come up with. Okay. Who's got one they'd like to share? Who's got an initiative they'd like to share, just connecting the assets on the table? All right, heading over here. Tell us all about it.
Okay. So, so our project, potentially called Connect to Protect. I just wrote that down. Where we go out in groups into the forests and into different beautiful places in nature for walking, hiking, camping, crafting, art, and doing like citizen science activities as well, where we support people to, connect with, the environment and beautiful places, so that they feel a sense of connection, so that we can then protect them. People feel connected and
Beautiful. Give them a woohoo. Did you have one? Yeah, okay. Connect to Protect.
I don't know if we have a fancy name, but ours is about getting a street together, so all neighbours, and then taking them on an adventure where they will do crafts. The adventure is generally camping or something like that, but mainly focusing on like connecting neighbours, because one of our members on our table has her street. They're all friends and they have the community. So creating that street neighbour community, doing crafts outdoors, creating a community.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you. Woo! Who else has got one? All right, I'll come over here, then the other side in a sec. Are you going to connect to Protect as well? No, you're right.
So our idea is one generation, and it's bringing all the generations together through all of our skills. So for some of us, we're really good at connecting groups, and we've got connections through all the generations of young people to old people, everything in between. And then myself, I can cook. We have others that are really good with fitness and activities. So bringing that together to bridge the gap between generations, building stronger connections with generations, and that's our one.
That's brilliant. Give them a woohoo. All right. Did we have one? Yep, over here. Oh, well, you could, but, I'm getting my steps up.
Our social enterprise is called Sculpt. So we will be teaching young people how to make cakes and sculpt cakes, and we'll be selling them. So that's how we'll be getting some funding in. And then with that money, we'll be running different types of activities based on everyone's skills. So we'll have like cooking, we'll be doing like piano and music. We'll be running things around yoga. So we're going to offer a variety of different activities. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Are you creating the website now?
No.
Thank you. Give me a woohoo. All right. Wait, one more. Yeah. Did someone else want to share? All right, we'll come back.
Hello. My daughter's actually creating the, I guess, the flyer for our program. Just want to. We're known as Mama's Safe Haven. We're a group of women that provide safety and healing for our community, and we offer food, music, singing, craft, yoga, and advocacy for people who are vulnerable, particularly women and children. So we have a space where you can come and heal and feel safe and protected.
Beautiful. Give them a woo. Excellent. Did I hear one more get disappointed they weren't speaking? Was there? Was it? Yeah?
Yep, so our program is, we wanted to specifically focus on music and sports because we know that's what young people specifically like, and our program was going to be called Kick and Play. Is that right? So that's combining, I guess, more kind of DJing, music production, and the reason why I came up with that, it was I did a specific program like that in Sydney a while ago, and that was really helpful for me. And in regards to the sporting stuff as well, I mean, there's so much flexibility there to provide that sporting stuff for young people with disabilities, and cater to a wide range of people.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you. Give me a woo. All right. Thanks, everyone. So you can see that, like, in 4.5 minutes, You can come up with stuff, right? And there wasn't any of them that I heard that I didn't think of someone who's doing something similar that I'll connect you to. So I know there's one that's around baking the cakes. There was a couple of those. And they actually, it's in southern Sydney, and they turned it into pathways to employment as well for young people, yeah? Sports in the neighbourhood. There's a heap of those. And also with music. So there's, the sky's the limit. You know, when you're connecting these assets to who and what people care about enough to act on. So this group up here is in Singapore, and anyone who follows me on Facebook will know that I often only show my forehead. There it is. And this was really about how they could create local active hubs in Singapore, because a lot of it's high-rise, where they could still gather together and share resources, information, all that kind of stuff. So one of the local, what we would call an op shop, they are called Goodwill stores over there, right? So they put up a hashtag on their social media, and it was called Goodwill Hunting, and they took a whole bunch of resources out of the shop and went to different places around the neighbourhood and did like a little pop-up op shop. So they put Goodwill Hunting, and people would have to come find them. And it was really cool. And they'd be there with tea and coffee and some food and stuff. So, yeah, anything is possible. The other thing around the assets is perspective. People have different perspectives on what things might look like. So this group of blind men were asked, what is an elephant? And they all had their own perspective based on where they were, what they sensed, what they felt, how they heard it. They all had these different perspectives of what an elephant is. So we can think of that with the assets in community as well. Something that you might not see as an asset could be to someone else. I was working in Burnie in Tasmania, and I'll give my dirty secret away now. I'm a smoker, right? And so I was out on the street, and I do not litter. I won't put my butt on the ground. But that one. And so I was finished, and I'm like, oh, where do I put this? I don't see like an ashtray. I don't see anything here. And what I saw that someone else had seen as an asset was all the light poles in the main street were all painted, almost kind of jungle theme and animals, and they were just beautiful. And the ashtray was on the pole, and it was part of that painting. So it kind of kept it away from the gaze, you know, of people's gaze, but it was part of the kind of landscaping of the main street, these beautiful paintings. It was really, really amazing. So you've seen like poles with murals on them, electrical boxes, that kind of stuff. So that perspective can really shift. I've got so much I want to share with you. Does anyone know appreciative inquiry? Couple of people? Okay, cool. So this is called the 5D cycle. What I'm just going to go through quickly here before I wrap up is that this is a potential pathway for planning. It's one of many, and it's not linear. So when we're looking at kind of the core in the centre there is about reframing. So rather than like a project I was part of that was through Newcastle University around domestic and family violence, instead of focusing on that, we reframed it through appreciative inquiry, and we flipped it, and we looked at instead, for all neighbours, for everyone in these communities we're working in, what can you do if you see or witness a family or domestic violence incident? So we flipped it to make it a whole of community concept. And we came up with some amazing stuff. But that's that kind of core there. The delivery, the dreaming, all of those, the 5Ds around there, they're not meant to be linear. I've got a 5 minute now. Okay, cool. And you go backwards and forwards as needed. So if the group aren't all together, or you think, hang on, I'm not sure if we're on the same page with that dream, let's go back. So one of my colleagues, Amanda Howard, says that all change is linguistic. So if we can change our language from a deficit-based to a strength-based model, and it's a daily practice. Sometimes you slip. Have that reminder, but all change is linguistic if we move forward with that. So this one with the define for appreciative inquiry for planning, with defining, what we're looking at is that real focus of what we're inquiring about. I am not going over all these dot points. These are just examples. You can all have these slides. I'll leave them with whoever can disseminate them to you. They're yours. And I've got a list there of the practices and processes, so participatory and interactive practices and processes that you might use to define a particular thing you're inquiring about, and then some example questions that you might ask of people. Then same with discover. So that next phase is appreciating the best of what is. So what is it that we've got here? Appreciative inquiry is about appreciating what we've got and inquiring how we can get more of it. So a lot of this is that asset mapping. So we're really appreciating what's there. Let's asset map and discover all of that stuff that is there, all the good stuff. And you've got practices, processes, and questions there. Then into the dreaming. So imagining what could be. So what is possible? What is your community's preferred future vision? Now that we've kind of done that bit of mapping, what is possible? And then we've got the questions, etc. there as well. Then in the designing, we're determining what should be. So this is where we're kind of looking at, okay, we've gathered all of this, we've had conversations about what could be, what might be next. So we're starting to move into that design and looking at what do we actually do next. Remembering also keeping community at the centre, making sure they're involved in that co-production. And then the delivery. So this is where we're creating what will be. So what's our action plan? What's our next steps? Is community at the centre? Are we starting with a focus on assets or deficits? So like I said, you'll get a copy of these if you want them, so you can have a look through all of those. This was from Eleanor Roosevelt. It takes as much energy to wish as it does to plan. So, you know, we can do both, but don't leave things as a wish list. Make sure that we still plan. The 3 drivers of ABCD, we talk about hope. And I love that this takes hope from a passive word to something really active. And it's helping other possibilities emerge. So when we're hoping, we're helping other possibilities emerge. Another driver is care. And this one to me is my favourite, and I wouldn't say most important because I think they all are, but it really hits my heart and makes me think of who I'm talking to and what questions I'm asking them. And this is about finding people's motivation to act, because this is what it says. This is what this talks about. When we discover what people truly care about, we discover their motivation to act, and we can mobilise the assets. But we need to have those conversations to find out what they care about enough to act on. So that's really important. And then the other driver is relationships, like I said. Oh, that picture, there's 4 kids on that bike with that dad. You can pick it. So yeah, building relationships is so important. So just last couple of slides in summary, the ABCD power ladder is really handy, and it's really looking at how do we shift power? How do we disperse decision making? How do we encourage more people in? When we're looking at residents as recipients from the bottom, how can we shift up that ladder? So residents are more than information sources. They're more than a tick box on a survey. How can they be advisors and advocates? And finally, how can they be the residents in control? And it's highly possible, and it takes time, and it takes commitment. And then a last quote I'll share with you here from Margaret Wheatley. For those who don't know her, she's an incredible author and activist. I've done a lot of work with her over the years through New Zealand and Australia, but she says, there is no power for change greater than a community discovering what it cares about. When we get to that care, we find people's motivation to act. So in summary, dare to think small. Take those small steps. Just do something. Start, that strength-based journey if you haven't already. Celebrate those small steps. in this sector, we come up against brick walls or we come up against the word no often. So when you do have a success, when something is really good, even if it is a small thing, a small shift, one young man got an apprenticeship in a paint shop, whatever it is, celebrate it, because we need to celebrate more. Keeps us going too. Lead by stepping back. Step up to lead. Show the way. Step back. Let the momentum happen. Be that safety net. Be there for people when they need you. You can still be part of it, but we're really encouraging that bottom-up approach. And Mike Green, who is one of my mates in Colorado in the ABCD in action space, and he says, starting anywhere leads everywhere. So just start. Just do one thing. Like that 5H's conversation with someone in your office. Start somewhere. Just do something small. So thank you. And as I said, these slides are yours. Let us know if you want them. And I love being back around CDAT. So thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah.